we are finally crossing that finish line. The X on the map has been pinpointed and the Holy Grail is on the horizon. We are down to the final 10, the top 10, if you will, of the 100 scariest wrestlers of all time. It's been quite the journey so far. The best way to get caught up is to check out all the videos or the complete video once it's done. Before we hop into it, let's give you the whole list. Here's all 90 that we got so far. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, hit notifications, and please leave a like before you go. The time is nigh. Let's do this. Number 10, Mankind. We had Mick Foley on the countdown earlier as Cactus Jack, and as scary as the Cactus Jack character was and is, I think you have to give the nod to the Mankind character as Mick Foley's scariest character. Why? Well, let's start with the name, Mankind. Just weird. It was like he was speaking for all mankind. Next thing we'll talk about is the mask. It's like Foley went in there and said, hey, I'd like a deranged jockstrap look. Also, you had the fact that they would emphasize that it was missing part of his ear, creepy vignettes and promos, check, and you combine that with the wrestling style that Foley had already as Cactus Jack, and you can make the argument that he took all that a step further with Mankind. Just look at Hell in the Cell 1998, and that should be reason enough. We love you, Mick Foley. Number 9, Kane. Glenn Jacobs was born in 1967. He began wrestling in 1992, originally as Angus King. He bounced around the Southern Territories like USWA and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and I think he was always kind of on the WWE's radar. They brought him in, took a look at him. At first, they decided to package him as Isaac Yankem DDS, but that, of course, lamed out. From there, he went back to the USWA and stuff like that while they kind of ironed out and figured out something else to do with him. Them meaning the WWE, obviously. They even brought him back up as the fake Kevin Nash, the fake Diesel at one point, which we won't talk about that. But then he got repackaged as Kane, Undertaker's long-lost brother, who was burned in a fire that apparently was Undertaker's fault. This led to about a 5-month storyline, which finally culminated in his debut, and I think what was supposed to be just kind of a spot character, amazingly enough, turned into something that gave the guy almost a 20-year run in the business. Through several different incarnations, talking, not talking. What made Kane scary, of course, was his mask, and either his non-words or words, depending on which version of Kane you got. His origin story is scary in of itself, and now he's the mayor of Knox County in Tennessee, so for some reason that's scary to me too. 2. Number 8, George the Animal Steele. Born William Myers in 1937, he began wrestling in 1960, and what made him scary, of course, was his presence as well as his mannerisms. That was probably the most important thing. And let's not forget the look. He basically looked like one of your weird uncles after he had had a little bit too much to drink. This guy's scariness transcended wrestling, so much so that he actually starred in quite a few Hollywood movies, mainly the movie Ed Wood, if you want to check that out. Kind of weird, as he played a scary guy on TV, but in real life was a devout Christian that believed in God and went to church. So take that for what you will. He all the way retired in the year 2000, and he went to that big wrestling ring in the sky in 2017 at the ripe young age of 79. Number 7, Papa Shango. Charles Wright was born in 1961 and began his wrestling career in 1989. By 1991, he had caught the attention of the World Wrestling Federation. They brought him in, looked at him, then Vince McMahon tried to shape him in his own image, and that image would be Papa Shango, who was scary because of his look with his threads and the face paint, and the fact that he was some sort of voodoo priest, which that fact was lost on me as a child. I kind of just looked at him as kind of like how a lot of kids would have looked at the boogeyman in the 2000s. But there was that time he made Ultimate Warrior puke all over himself, as well as made his forehead bleed. This solidified his place in wrestling fans' nightmares, for better or for worse. Mr. Wright would go on to several different, albeit more successful gimmicks, but this was the one that scared people the most. Number 6, the Black Scorpion. Hear me out, okay? The promos themselves were scary, and the promos themselves are right enough for them to deserve to be on this list all alone. Sting, I have a present for you, Sting. Something that absolutely haunted my dreams for years as a child. So partial credit for this goes to Ole Anderson as the voice of those promos, as well as whoever helped produce these things. Not so much credit, though, goes to the actual Black Scorpion portrayal in real life, which ended up to be Ric Flair in a mask, ended up being kind of lame in execution. Either way, I believe it deserves to be here. Number 5, the Ultimate Warrior. Hear me out, okay? Warrior was scary, even though he was a good guy. I mean, take a look at this guy. He definitely wasn't like the other kids. Born James Hellwig in 1959, he began bodybuilding at an early age and parlayed that into a wrestling career by the year of 1985. Early on, known as Blade Runner Rock and the Blade Runners tag team, along with Blade Runner Sting, he then stormed through World Class a couple years later, and then on to the WWE, where he was repackaged as the Ultimate Warrior. So the look and the sheer physique is number 1. If we want to throw the face paint in there, that's number 2. Number 3, and probably most important in this case with Warrior, was the promos. The way the Warrior would almost speak through the camera right into your living room would send chills up and down your spine. And extra bonus points if you could actually figure out anything he was actually talking about ever. That sort of thing is unsettling. That sort of thing is scary. Case closed. Number 4, Kamala. Here comes Kamala with a mouse. One of my earliest memories right there. No, not Kamala Harris, Kamala the wrestler. James Harris was born in 1950, and he began wrestling in the year 1978. Just imagine being a kid and this guy coming across your screen, okay? With the look making him scary, you double down on that with the actions. You actually 100% believe that they pulled this guy out of an African jungle somewhere and just let him loose in a wrestling ring. We figured such things were totally possible in the 1980s. Guy worked everywhere, did everything, scared everyone, everywhere along the way. He officially retired in 2010 and went to that great wrestling ring in the sky in 2020 at the age of 70. Number 3, Abdullah the Butcher. This was really hard for me. At one point, I did have Abby all the way at number 1. Born Lawrence Shreve in 1941. He began wrestling in 1958. It wasn't long into his career for him to create this Abdullah the Butcher, the character, for himself, and that's what he made a career out of. What made Abdullah the Butcher scary was his look, obviously, the sheer size of the man, and as the years went by, the more and more scars that he would collect on his body were also intimidating. You couple that with the thoughts and the facts of what he could actually do to you in the ring, completely unpredictable. He also spoke in a way that was very terrifying, and while the promos may not have been literary works of art, they were definitely effective at getting their point across and scaring the living daylights of young wrestling fans, and I'm sure even some older wrestling fans. For years and years and years, this guy did it. He had his last match in 2010. A national treasure to us, Abdullah the Butcher is. Number 2, The Undertaker. This is another real hard one because you definitely can make the argument for Undertaker to be number 1. Everyone in this top 3 to me is pretty much interchangeable, but for the purposes of this list, I've got Taker at number 2. Born Mark Calloway in 1965, he began training in 1986 and officially debuted in 1987. He floundered around for a few years, but did get some experience in a lot of key places like World Championship Wrestling and Japan. In 1990, he found his new home with the World Wrestling Federation and the man that would become his pseudo-father, Vince McMahon. When he debuted, he was very scary, even though I wasn't particularly scared of him at first. The more and more this character went on and developed, the scarier it got. You add Paul Bearer as his manager, which may have been the scariest thing about it all. He starts putting people in caskets all the time. I mean, as a kid, it's hard to even come to grips with what death actually is, and here's this guy on our TV on this wrestling program putting people in caskets. Man, maybe that's why I'm scarred for life. After a few years, Taker would come to the lighter side of things, and he would use his evil for more good. So it'd be a little less scary there for a bit, because for a while he was on our side. But I'd be a failure if I did not mention his late 90s transition into his satanic priest Ministry of Darkness gimmick. That was pretty scary, the fact that he was crucifying people on his Undertaker symbol each week. I mean, one time he tried to embalm Stone Cold Steve Austin. It stacks up, the numbers add up. The Undertaker is our number 2. Good job, Take. All right, folks, here we are. Without any further ado, here it is. Number 1, The Fiend. We talked about Bray Wyatt earlier. We talked about the Wyatt family earlier. And as scary as all that was, the man, the myth, the legend, Wyndham Rotunda, took all that a step further for us and created a character named The Fiend. I think when it's all said and done and we look back at the history of wrestling, I don't know if you're going to have another guy that ever put so much mental energy and thought into a character as Bray Wyatt, Wyndham Rotunda, whatever you want to call it, as this man put into The Fiend. The entire presentation of everything, I think, was excellently crafted, and when it comes right down to it, it's very, very sad that we will never ever get to see more of it. The tie-in between the character that he would portray in the Firefly Funhouse, the transition into The Fiend, and back and forth therein some, I think for a good couple years there was some of the best stuff we would get on WWE TV from a promo standpoint. Let's not forget about the character itself and all the things that made The Fiend scary, which of course would be the look, the very intricate mask, coupled with that entrance was nothing short of something straight out of a nightmare. You add that with the mannerisms, we wouldn't get promos from the guy. He never talked, which when it's all said and done, thank goodness that WWE never got to the point where they decided to do that with him. The connection between the normal Bray Wyatt and The Fiend, something that was truly unique and special, and I don't know if it'll ever be pulled off quite as well ever again. History right before our very eyes, and sadly I don't think enough people appreciated it at the time, and there's a lot of people that even want to go back in retrospect and not appreciate it now, even though that we've lost Mr. Rotunda. Be that as it it may, he will always be iconicized and immortalized right here as the #1 scariest wrestler in all of professional wrestling history. Holy smokes! I can't believe we did it. We got through all 100 of those things somehow, some way. I made all these videos. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Thank you very much for joining us. That was quite a list. I know there may be a few I left out. If you can think of any, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching and joining us here. My name is The Brand. This is Pro Wrestling Planet. Hope you enjoyed your stay, and I hope that you'll join us again sometime soon. The best way to do that is to go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now. Hit that notification bell so you know what's going on. That's all I ask. Please leave a like on your way out. We'll see you next time right here, right now on Pro Wrestling Planet.